Absolutely. You know, one of the things I love about our church is that there's a lot of Sundays represented in here. And so, this could be your first Sunday. And if it is, welcome. We're glad you're here. Maybe online you're tuning in for the first time. We're glad you're a part of this with our Sundays. But along with first Sundays, we have people, maybe you've been here a couple of Sundays, or maybe you've been here hundreds of Sundays, or somewhere in between is where you fall. And so depending on when your Sunday journey began here, depends on maybe what you've heard and know about what we have called our Next campaign. Our Next campaign started in March of 2023. This was a 3-year campaign geared towards what was next in the history or future of Crossroads. And so we were working together to kind of look at these different elements of things that were in our future that we could be a part of together. And church, before we get into what we accomplished, I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your generosity, and thank you for going above and beyond what was asked of you. In this Next campaign, we had over 500 people contribute in some form or another just through generous donations. Thank you. In this Next campaign, we raised over $1.7 million to be able to fund different projects that we'll talk about in just a second. Thank you. Thank you for your continued generosity. Thank you for being a part of this. And I realized that during this Next campaign, we went through kind of an abrupt leadership change in our church. But what we have realized and understood all along is that even though we have our own limitations, even though we go through our own struggles, that God is still working. And that God is still working here in our church. And so I want to share just some of the next updates with you before we dive in this morning. Due to your generosity, we were able to build a Shelby Ministry Center and then give that Shelby Ministry Center away to a women's center who was dealing with women who have experienced this life trauma. And so because of your generosity, we were able to build that and then give that away. Part of the Next campaign was building renovations and repairs. We are in an older building. And for some of you who maybe you've got some Mansfield history, pre-Crossroads, this building was vacant. But before it was vacant, it was what was called Farmore. Anybody remember Farmore in here? Oh, yeah. My story that I love to tell, when I was a kid, I would go to Farmore, and I would go into what is now our lead pastor's office, and I would rent video games in that office. And that was kind of my origin to Farmore, right? There is some life and history in this building. And there are certainly pros and cons to having an older building. But there were time for some repairs and some upgrades and things that needed just kind of updating. We also built a play place to just be a resource for families. And we were able to support LifeWise and Fostering Family Ministries and these different organizations who are about kingdom impact. And so churches, because of you and your generosity, that we were able to do these things. And I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for going above and beyond what was asked of you. And we are so grateful. And it's ironic that when you finish the Next campaign, the question becomes, well, what's next? And so I want to answer that with this. One of the themes of our staff that we've kind of been just telling each other is get ready. Get ready, because we believe God is doing something special here. In the next couple of weeks and months, we're going to be unveiling some things that we really think are just going to continue to move our church forward in a mighty way. And so you're going to begin to hear about this soon. But here's kind of the underlying tone of where I believe our church is shifting. We are going to be going from a church that is in the community to becoming a church that is desperately for our community. And so over the next couple of weeks and months, you're going to be hearing about new initiatives and ministry opportunities that we are so excited about. So my encouragement to you is get ready. Get ready, because God is doing something special. We're going to dive in today. If you have your Bibles, turn to the book of Joshua, chapter 13. If you do not have a Bible, slip your hand out. We've got ushers who we love to give Bibles away. We love for people to be in God's Word, to read God's Word. Just put your hand up. They'll bring you one. That is yours to keep right in. Whatever you need to do, bring it back with you every time you're here. We just believe this is a valuable part of your Christian walk, is being in God's Word. And today we'll be in Joshua chapter 13. Before we dive in, I want to give you just a bit of an announcement and a prayer request concerning Pastor Andrew. Pastor Andrew was scheduled to be here today, but he came down with a really rough case of shingles. And so has asked for your prayers. And you know he loves to be here. He loves to preach. He loves to be a part of this Sunday experience. And so if he can't be here, he's obviously in some pain. So I would ask for your prayers for him over the next week and weeks as he is kind of battling some of the lingering effects that this will have. And so certainly would covet your prayers and want to keep you in the know of where he's at and what's going on. But he would love to be here. I'm sure would love to be here much more than where he's currently at right now. And so keep him in your prayers this week as he's battling some intense pain and difficulty with that. And he will be back as soon as he can. But we know he would want to be here. He loves preaching, loves this experience in the morning, and desperately misses this. So for us, we are going to be in Joshua chapter 13. We've been in a series through the book of Joshua. We've studied the first 12 chapters. The first 12 chapters read kind of like this. There's a lot of conquest, conquering, overcoming kings and armies, and incredible stories through the first 12 chapters of Joshua. You get to chapter 13 of Joshua, and we realize the seasons begin to change for Joshua. It's not so much about the conquests and conquering these different lands. He has a different responsibility now, a different role. And I don't know if you've ever kind of had that verbalized to you, or you felt a changing of your season, or maybe it's been shared to you, or you felt it, or someone said it to you. I know for me, just a few weeks ago, I was in our lobby here, and there was a little girl who is dear to our family who we've not seen for a couple of weeks, and she runs up to me and she gives me a big hug. And then I could tell she's about to say something. She's looking at me. And you know, you can like see a kid's filter. Like you could kind of see them thinking, do I say this? I'm like, uh-oh. And this is I have one of those kids in my family, like, you're just not sure what's gonna be said. Like it could be really good. It could be really bad. It's just a wild card of what comes out of the kid's mouth. And so she runs up to me and she says, Jesse, you're old now. And I thought, I'm so confused because this wasn't like a topic of conversation we had been discussing. It wasn't anything that, her and I had kind of worked on. And there was something in her mind that clicked that now, not previously, but now I am old. And honestly, I didn't need a further explanation. I really didn't. I was good. I heard that, thought, thank you, go find your mom. But there was more to come. And she's looking at me, and again, I see the filter in her mind. Like, do I say this? And her answer was yes. And she says, your beard is really gray. I thought, this is a delightful conversation. And so sometimes when seasons change, they get announced to you. Sometimes you feel it. Sometimes you experience it. Sometimes it just happens. And so today we'll be wrestling with seasons and change. In Joshua 13, it says this. Now Joshua was old and advanced in years. And the Lord said to him, you are old and advanced in years. Thank you, Lord. And there remains yet very much land to possess. This is the land that yet remains. All the regions of the Philistines and all those of the Geshurites, from the Shihor, which is east of Egypt, northward to the boundary of Ekron. It is counted as Canaanite. There are 5 rulers of the Philistines, those of Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron, and those of the Avim. In the south, all the land of the Canaanites, and Mira, that belongs to the Sidonians, to Aphek, to the boundary of the Amorites, and the land of the Gebalites, and all Lebanon, toward the sunrise, from Baal-Gad below Mount Hermon to Lebo-Hamath, all the inhabitants of the hill country from Lebanon to Mishrophath-Maim, even all the Sidonians. I myself will drive them out from before the people of Israel. Only allot the land to Israel for an inheritance, as I have commanded you. Now therefore divide this land for an inheritance to the 9 tribes and half the tribe of Manasseh. When we look at this, it's interesting because you get a very, very clear message from the Lord, followed by a different message from the Lord. He says, Joshua, you're old and advanced in years. Now, this was not meant as a derogatory statement. This is not something that was meant really even negative, but more so just an acknowledgement of the season that he was now entering. And it's presumed that about this time, he's probably about 95 years old. He says, Joshua, you're old and advanced in years. But followed by Joshua, you're old, there is a rather lengthy, involved, and detailed to-do list that follows. He says, Joshua, this land we still have to possess. And he goes through and you think about what that to-do list would look like, right? To capture these regions, to go into Philistia and to get these 5 different areas, to battle the kings and armies, even just to make the trek of the Phoenician coast, the Lebanon mountain range, and into the Philistine area is about 225 miles, right? So even if it's just traveling to these places, that in of itself is going to be a journey and a pretty big thing on the to-do list. But then at the end of the to-do list, he also said, and distribute this land. And so we think about kind of what we've read in the first 12 chapters. The first 12 chapters of Joshua, it's action-packed, right? It's wars, it's battles, it's tearing down Jericho. It's doing all these miraculous things that we see Joshua get to be a part of. Then we get to Joshua 13, and it's like surveying land. It's like drawing a map verbally, right? Just kind of laying these things out. And so we see this kind of shift and change for Joshua, where he had been this spy, he had been this commander, this warrior, this mighty man of God. And now, his season begins to change. And we sense this. It says, Joshua, you're old, but we have these things to do. And now Joshua's responsibility in those things are changing. And maybe you've felt a changing season before. It's certainly not limited to old age, right? You think about the seasons that we occur in our life, even right now. I know of graduations that are happening, high school seniors who are graduating today and headed off to college or career or perhaps something else. College graduates going into the career. Single people becoming married, married people becoming parents, parents becoming empty nesters to retirement. All these different seasons that change over time. But it's not just based on age. It's not just based on relationship dynamics. It could be a different type of season that you've encountered. Perhaps it's a season of overcoming sin, or a season of growth, or a season of trying to figure things out, or a season of commitment, or a season where you just feel like everything around you is breaking. A season of unknown and not sure what is next. We have all these different seasons that we encounter in our life. And what do we do with these seasons? There was a quote that I think helps us to understand the kind of value of the seasons that we see. It says to cherish every season of life. For without coldness, there is no comfort and warmth. And without darker days, there is no joy in light. See, the seasons in life that we face, there's no real specifics to them. You could be in a season that lasts a couple of days, a couple of weeks, months, possibly even years. You could be in a season that is joyful, fun, perhaps it's confusing, painful, broken. So we have all these different seasons that we encounter. All these different seasons that kind of make up our life. And so what we're going to do is attempt to look at these seasons through the book of Joshua. That how we can maximize that whatever season you're in, from graduating high school to retirement to emptiness, that whatever season you find yourself in, that we can learn to maximize our seasons together. The first thing that I think is important is to be mission-minded in your seasons. Right? That whatever the season that you encounter, whatever that season is, if there is a level of mission and kingdom-minded impact in your season. That you think about those seasons, you think about what it's kind of about and how we celebrate it. But that in that season that we become mission-minded. That we understand that there is a mission within the season that we are called to serve out. I'm reminded of a story I heard about a rescue station. See, there was some really treacherous waters, experienced heavy storms, heavy wind, heavy rain. They constantly were finding boats that were shipwrecked, people were stranded. And so they built this little hut and dock to kind of be a rescue station for the people. So a couple volunteers would go there, and every night they would go out and they just begin to kind of perform these rescue missions. They would go out and try and attempt to save boats, to save people, and try to make it as safe as possible in a treacherous area. And they were committed to that. Certainly there was a degree of difficulty and danger that was associated with them. But they were committed to the mission of trying to save people. And over time, they began to get almost famous for the work that they were doing. Because of the sacrifice that they had, because of their willingness to kind of put their lives on the line, because of their willingness to go above and beyond, they began to receive a lot of accolades. And along with that accolades, there became more support, more financial support, more community support, more volunteer support. And over time, that rescue station that started just kind of as a little hut and a dock to be able to go out and save people grew into something much more. It was no longer just a hut, but a nice facility. They had put nice amenities in there. It was a place that you'd want to be. And over time, the mentality began to shift. The willingness to go out and complete these dangerous missions began to wane. Suddenly the eagerness for those things was no longer prevalent. The eagerness was more so for comfort. Even to the point when there was a rescue that needed to be happened, that was called in, that someone was stranded. They're looking around like, you want to take this one? I'm good in my recline. You go, maybe I'll get the next one. And all of a sudden they try to barter with each other about who it is that's going to go. And tried to push this onto someone else. To the point where that when they rescued someone, brought them back to the facility, and people were annoyed that this person was bringing in all this stuff that's getting on the carpet, it's getting on the furniture. Can we not bring the rescued people here? Can they go somewhere else, please? Right, see, they began to divert from the mission of saving people. And the mission became comfort. That as long as I'm comfortable, everything else is going to be okay. And when you look at the life of Joshua for the first 12 chapters, you see that it wasn't about comfort, it was about obedience. Right? That he was called to do some difficult things that certainly would have brought about some discomfort. Some things that would have taken him out of that comfort zone. You look back at his life and the accolades that we celebrated. Walking around Jericho. Crossing the Jordan River, seeing these battles against kings and armies. There is obedience there, not comfort. It would not have been comfortable to go into war after war in the first 12 chapters. In fact, what we see in Joshua chapter 12 is it's about 31 different kings and armies that Joshua battled against. That's not comfortable. Right, but what we see with Joshua time and time again is his obedience, his faithfulness, and his willingness to do the next right thing. And that's a great reminder for us that whatever season we are in, that we should be mission-minded. We should have this missional focus about what we're doing. And the mission cannot be comfort, but rooted in obedience. That God, wherever you have me, wherever you place me, I'm willing to do what you need me to do. And that we have this mission mindedness about us. And as we look at this, I think the next important thing is then to be ready to adapt. When we talk about seasons changing, we certainly can highlight some of the more popular seasons that we see. You talk about parenting and marriage and retirement, right? There's also, we celebrate a lot of these things. You think of the high school seniors, and they get this graduation party. You think of these new parents, and they get kind of a baby shower, newlyweds, a bridal shower. people who are retiring, they get a retirement party. We get so many different types of parties for transitioning into the big seasons. But oftentimes when we transition into seasons, there's almost a sense of grief, of mourning, of loss. You think about what Joshua had accomplished up until this point. The stories that we have read and shared about Joshua. The victories that he has faced. And now, to be told, Joshua, you're old. And it wasn't a derogatory thing. It wasn't an insulting thing. It was simply the reality of what they were facing. Joshua's now advanced in years. In fact, throughout Scripture, you'll see that word, and it has it interesting. It's not always referencing age, right? Because there are people who were 120 who were not yet considered old. There are people who were 50 who were considered old. It wasn't so much as a number as it was an ability. That Joshua was maybe no longer able to do what he had done. And there comes a time for transition. And when you look at those transitions, it's so important to be able to prepare yourself for what's next. Right? My daughter has just finished her track season. And I never ran track. I really respect it as a sport. I think it's great for development. It's great for, just increasing your speed and doing these things. But one of the areas I've grown pretty fond of is a relay. Right? Because a relay requires intense individual effort, followed by, there's this exchange that happens. Right, and in this exchange, if you're not familiar, one runner is running forward, one runner is waiting, but also pacing themselves to line up so they don't really slow down, and they want to have the most efficient exchange possible. Right, and so it would be really kind of pointless that if one runner is sprinting here, and I'm just standing here waiting like this. Come on. Right, and there's no movement, there's no preparation on my end. You do all the work so I can just take this baton and go. Right, but part of that exchange is I start preparing myself so that we can have a great exchange into this transition. So often in these transitional seasons, we find ourselves waiting. And I think sometimes we wait with kind of this anticipation for what's next. We wait with this idea that, okay, I need to see what is it that God has for me. And so we find ourselves just kind of stopping and pausing and not really going anywhere, not really doing anything. The other day, my son was going to a friend's house, and they were coming to pick him up. And he said, Dad, I'm going to go wait by the door until they get here. I said, okay, buddy, go for it. I look at my watch, and I realize he's got about 25 minutes until they're there. I said, hey, bud, why don't you come hang out with me for a little bit? They're not going to be here for about 25 minutes. He said, no, thanks. I'm just going to wait here. And he did. And for 25 minutes, he just sat by the door, looked out the window, and waited. Waited for what was next. And sometimes I think that's us. Right? That we get so caught up in waiting that we're no longer obedient. We're no longer mission focused. We're no longer faithful. We're just waiting. We're sitting there and we're waiting. Not really doing anything, but just waiting. I think what we have to learn about when we transition to seasons, it's never really a perfect time to transition seasons. There's always something. There's always some reason why now may not be the best time. But as we talk about transition, I think it's important for us to keep that same mentality in mind. That even while we're waiting, we are still called to be obedient. You look at the example that Joshua would have experienced. Being in the wilderness, the desert, for 40 years. Watching people not wait well. Complaining, arguing, wishing they could go back to a previous way of life, right? And just the waiting just becomes too much for them. And so there's real value in learning to wait. But while you're waiting you're not idle. There's a difference between waiting and just sitting there being idle. Because you could have an active wait. Right? You could still be involved and engaged while you're waiting and not just sitting idly by. Someone compared it to kind of an airport setting. I don't know if you've been to the airport recently, but things slow down a little bit there, right? I feel this pressure when I go to the airports. You gotta hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, hurry up and wait, right? You gotta make sure you get to these certain places at certain times, but then you wait. And then you gotta get to the next place at a certain time, and then you wait. And you gotta make sure you're there, make sure you check in, make sure you get through TSA, get to the gate, all these things, and then you wait. It's this constant game of hurry up and wait. But sometimes our waiting looks like we've done all those things. We just find ourselves sitting in the airport terminal, just waiting for our flight to get there, just waiting for our row to be called, just waiting for permission to go. They said, really, the view that we should have is not so much of sitting in the airport terminal, but more so those who are working on the airplane, right? Those who are preparing it for that next flight, that next kind of experience that they have, to make sure everything's ready to go, to review the notes from the last flight, and then to make sure that everything is ready for the next flight. That we're not just called to sit and to wait, but to be obedient even in our waiting. Even as we're waiting for that next season, that we are to be obedient in our waiting. And as we're waiting, we understand that there are things in front of us that we can accomplish. And it could be that you're waiting, you're not even sure what you're waiting for. Right? You're not sure what the next season really is. And so I think the example we can learn from Joshua is that we do the next right thing in front of us. Right? That we continue to be faithful. We continue to be obedient with whatever God has in front of us right now while you're waiting. And it's not just waiting until you get to the next thing. It's while you're waiting, you're doing these things so you're prepared for the next season. That this waiting season you're currently in is filled by doing the next right thing that's in front of you. By being faithful to what God has asked of you. By being obedient to what God has asked you. So when you get to the next season, you are ready. The third thing I think is important for us is be determined to finish strong. Be determined to finish strong, because I think it's important for us. You look at Joshua and you hear those words. Joshua, you're old now. You're advanced in your years. But then the rest of that verse is Joshua, there's more work to be done. In fact, it says, now Joshua was old and advanced in years, and the Lord said to him, you are old and advanced in years, and there remains yet very much land to possess. There's some unfinished business. And maybe before you get to that next season, you need to tend to that unfinished business. Maybe you realize in your life what that unfinished business looks like. Maybe you realize in your life what that unfinished business really is. Maybe you've already named it. You already know it. Now it's working on it. It's not waiting. It's not waiting for the unfinished business to pass by. But be determined to finish strong. I can remember a number of years ago, the Los Angeles Lakers were playing the Orlando Magic in the NBA Finals, best of 7. The Lakers go up 2-0. And they go to interview Kobe Bryant after the game. And in the interview, he's just stoic, intense. He's not smiling at all. They said, Kobe, why aren't you happy? You're up 2-0. Why aren't you excited? And he just looks and replies, says, job's not finished. Job's not done. Right? There was more work to be done. It was never the goal for the Lakers to just win 2 games in the series. Right? Their goal was to win 4 games and become NBA champions. Job's not finished. And I think for us, we can find ourselves in that place sometimes. Right? Where we're wrestling with, we have this kind of fake-looking house. Right? Maybe you're building this house. The walls are up, the foundation's poured, the roof is on, and from the outside, the house looks complete. But when you open that house up, you walk in that house, you realize there's no flooring, there's no electrical work, there's no plumbing, there's nothing on the inside. It just looks like it's complete. And for many people, I think this is how we live our lives. As long as I have the appearance of looking like the job's finished, I'm good. As long as I can check a few boxes, I'm good. As long as people think the house is complete, I'm good. And so when we look at this and understand this call for us to finish strong, to take care of the unfinished business, maybe those boxes that you've checked, maybe it's like, well, I go to church once in a while, I do good things once in a while, and so I'm checking those boxes. Things are good. But maybe God's calling you to more. Maybe God's calling you to more than just checking a few boxes. Maybe God's calling you to more than just attending at church. Maybe God's calling you more than just do a couple good things. Maybe he's calling to a deeper surrender, a greater commitment. Maybe God is asking you to step into a season in which you're going to be uncomfortable. And the house might look like it's finished, but there is work to be done. You look at the life of Joshua, and you think about that to-do list that he was given to capture these regions, to go into Philistia and to get these 5 other areas, to battle these kings and armies, to make the trek of 225 miles. Even just accomplishing one of those things was going to be quite the ordeal for Joshua at this point. And so we realized that if he would have just stopped and said, yeah, I checked one of those boxes. He conquered about 31 different areas leading up to this. 31 kings and armies he was in battle with. If he would have just stopped after one and said, job's done. God's calling me to more, but I'm good. I'm good where I'm at. I got this victory here, I'm good. Right? So what we continually see through Joshua is this ability to do the next right thing. That whatever is in front of him, whatever God asks of him, that he's willing to do. I don't know if you guys see that fly or not. That is the most, hit me right in the eye. Almost went down. It's wild. And so we look at what Joshua has done, the example that he has set before us. Right? This example of doing the next right thing, of just continued trust and obedience that we see from Joshua. And he could have stopped after a victory and said, God, I'm good. I'm good. This is great. My legacy is already cemented. There's nothing else for me. But he doesn't do that. Season after season, time after time, we see this continued obedience and faithfulness. God, what do you have for me? What do you want me to do? How can I best serve you? And we look at Joshua's example, we realize it's a standard that we can still follow today. It's a pattern that we can still ask of ourselves today. God, what do you have for me? I'm not just settling for this one small victory. God, I know that you have more for me. What do you have for me? And so it's one thing to kind of say that we transition through seasons. It's another thing to God say, I'm ready for this next season. God, I have prepared myself for this next season. God, what do you have for me in this next season? And you only get that confidence by being able to do what Joshua has done, by doing the next right thing in front of it, by being obedient, by being faithful. See, time and time again, Joshua has seen God's faithfulness. Joshua had seen God do amazing things, and it was a priority for him to remember those things. If you remember early back in the book of Joshua, we talked about these Ebenezers, these moments that you would build these rock statues so that you would recall that when you walk by this land, you know that God did something special here. Right? And it is with that foundation that you're able to step into a next season of, God, I've seen you do it. I'll know you'll do it again. God, I've seen you working. I know you will keep working. God, I've seen you continue to do things that go above and beyond what I could imagine. And I know you'll keep doing that. See, it's those transitions into those seasons where you realize that God is working throughout your seasons. That even though we might be limited by our own limitations, God is not limited by our limitations. And so we realize that through the life of Joshua, who had accomplished amazing things, that God was working in his life all along. That we see these foundation moments that allow him to be obedient in the next season because he believes in who God is. And he believes in God's promises because he's seen God be faithful. And so for some of you in here today, maybe that's your reminder. Maybe this is your reminder that God has been faithful to you, that God has kept his promises, that God has been working in your life all along. For others, maybe you haven't experienced that yet. Maybe you haven't realized that. Maybe you haven't seen that. But just know that even though you cannot see him, God is working. Even though you may not realize it, God is working. And as we look through the life of Joshua, and seasons are changing. It's no longer a life full of conquests and battles and victories against kings and armies. God is still working in his life, and God is still using him to do amazing things. He is still leading people. It just might look a little bit different right now. Because that's what happens sometimes. Sometimes we get to a point where we realize that God has been at work all along. That God has been working in our life, and we didn't even realize it. And so the final way to maximize your season is to be dependent on prayer. As you read through Joshua, certainly we started with Joshua, you're old, and there's work to be done. But I want to continue down. Because in verse 7 he says, or verse 6, excuse me, all the inhabitants of the hill country from Lebanon to Meshrophath-Maim, even all the Sidonians, I myself will drive them out before the people of Israel. God is still working. He says, Joshua, even though there's limitations in your age, even though there's limitations in your ability, I'm still at work, Joshua. I can still do amazing things. And even though there's limitations in what you're able to do, God, I'm still working for you. And so when we read through Joshua, maybe we resonate with that a little bit. It's that, God, I didn't even know you were working when you said you were working. I didn't even know you were doing the things that you said you were doing. You think about that to-do list and how big it was, how kind of massive it was, how just daunting and overwhelming it must be for Joshua to hear those two things. Joshua, you're old now. Joshua, we have this to do. But I want to show you something in just a few chapters later, and even the next book, that if you go to Judges chapter 3, in Judges chapter 3, verse 1, it says, these are the nations the Lord left to test all those Israelites who had not experienced any of the wars in Canaan. He did this only to teach warfare to the descendants of the Israelites who had not had previous battle experience. The 5 rulers of the Philistines, all the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites living in the Lebanon mountains from Mount Baal Hermon to Lebo Hamath, they were left to test the Israelites to see whether they would obey the Lord's commands, which he had given their ancestors through Moses. See, in the midst of all that, this was not an oops moment by God. This was not something that was forgotten. This was not something that God skipped over, kind of forgot this detail, forgot this part. In all of that, God knew it. God planned it. God was ready for it. God was going to use what had happened. It was not a surprise to him. And so sometimes we might find ourselves in a season of unknown, a season of brokenness, a season of confusion, a season of just unfortunate financial loss, and we're not sure how we're gonna be able to pay the bills. A season of broken relationships, and we're not sure what's next for our future. A season of job loss, a season of maybe you're in this medical waiting game. We're just waiting on results to kind of let you know what your future is gonna be like. And so certainly we celebrate a lot of those seasons and transitions, but there's seasons of life that are incredibly difficult. And sometimes we get so wrapped up in those seasons that we're not sure, how do I get out of this season? Is there a way out for me? Is there a way out of this season? Is there a path forward, or is this the season I'm just stuck in? And I want to encourage you with this. What we see from Joshua is that continued faithfulness, that continued obedience, that continued willingness to just do the next right thing in front of you, even if the season is hard, even if the season is unknown, even if it just seems like there's no way out. You've been walking around Jericho for days. To just be obedient to what God has for you. I know sometimes it's easy to say that in this setting, but when you're walking through that difficult season, you're walking through a season of unknown, a season of hurt and pain and confusion, man, it's hard to remember that sometimes. There is a song that I want to share with you that lyrically, I think it just speaks to those seasons. In fact, if you do this for me, would you go and stand to your feet? I want to read you these lyrics, and I want us to respond to these lyrics. I want us to respond to who God is. That maybe you're walking in a season right now where you just don't know if there's a way out, or you don't know what that way out looks like. You're not sure what it's about. You're not sure the next step forward. You're not sure where to go. You're just left stuck in a season. And the song, it says, God, you are a way maker. You are a miracle worker. You are a promise keeper. You are a light in the darkness. And it says, and even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working.